Hey guys, I've been having a couple people ask me how I make my wooden arrows. So I figured since I'm going to be making some new ones that match my jersey for the upcoming year, I'd go ahead and make a video. I'm no professional. This is just something I do as a hobby, something that's fun for me. So my style may not be the same as others. This is just kind of what I learned and what works for me. So the idea is to take a bear shaft and make it look something like this. This is one of my first arrows I ever made. It may not look the best, but it shoots straight, hits what I'm looking at, and that's good enough for me. So what I use for mine is for my crusting. I use a water-based paint. These are like 79 cents from Hobby Lobby, not very much. For my stain, I'll be using a Minwax wood stain. The penetrating stain, and for my clear coat, final coat, I use the water-based semi-gloss finish. So pretty much that's kind of what we'll be using. Need some sand, not sandpaper. We'll probably use a 3M pad and some double-aught steel wool to sand down in between coats on stuff. But so starting off, what we have here is my little spinner that I built. What this is it allows you to put the shaft on it and spin it, and this just tells me if my shaft is straight or not. So as I'm sitting here spinning it, I can see on this end I got a little bit of a wobble. So what we're gonna have to do is take it off, straighten it, and bring it back and spin it again and see how it does. So we're gonna change the camera angle and see if we can't get that on film for you. You can see in that video that it's got a little bit of a wobble in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix that, make it spin really straight. Okay. So what I do to straighten my bear shaft is find a level surface, and I just get eye level with it. And as you're rolling it, you can actually see where it's bending, where your bad spot is. So after I locate it, I can tell that right here in the center, it's got a pretty good sized bow in it. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a flex here and try to see how we're looking now. So that made it look a little bit better. Then we got a little bit of one right here. Give a little bit of a flex. A lot of people do hand straightening. Same concept. Same exact concept. So we're starting to get pretty straight there. So once we get that figured out, there's a couple spots that are a little tough here. So what we're going to do, use a beer bottle. That is probably one of the best things for straightening a shaft here. So whenever I find where my grain is raised, or where I have my bow, just run this beer bottle over it a time or two. What that does is that crushes the fibers inside the arrow, allowing it to start to straighten. So we're getting pretty close here. We're starting to get a little bit better. Alright. We're getting pretty close. So we'll go ahead and change the camera angle and see how we're spinning now. I think we got it straightened here. Put it on the spinner. That looks a ton better. There may be a slight wobble in there. I might try to see if I can't fix that, but even with that slight wobble, that's pretty good. So once we got them all straightened, what we're going to do is actually take some steel wool, and we're just gonna lightly sand every single shaft. I've already done every single shaft outside. It can get a little bit dusty. So once you get those sanded down, just take your microfiber cloth towel and wipe them down. And once you get them wiped down, they're ready to be stained. So what I do is I actually find myself a nice flat surface, get all my arrows in line, all my tips in line. And what I do is I mark about 9 inches for this certain build. I'm going to mark down about 9 inches. Make my mark. Both sides. What I'm going to do is just take myself a right angle. Make sure we're straight. Make my mark. So after that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take some painter's tape off where I don't want stained, and then I'm just going to give a nice dark stain with my Minwax penetrating stain, and until I achieve the color that I want, and then we go from there. So we're out in the shop now. We got our shafts, we got them taped off, and we're going to go ahead and start staining. Just going to do them one at a time. I usually use a little sponge brush. You can get them for like 40-50 cents. I put very little on my sponge. I don't put a whole lot in it. And I usually do 2 coats. Depending on how dark you want it, how light you want your stain. I want this dark, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a coat of stain on it. I'm going to leave it for about 10 minutes, wipe it off, and then we'll put another coat on it. So you really want to try to be very careful not to go onto the tape as you're putting on this stain. The tape is pretty much just a marker, because this stain can bleed through the tape, but it's not anything to really worry about, especially for me, because I'm going to be putting a crest over where the band goes. So I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and paint pretty close to the tape there, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start making even, smooth strokes. And that leaves a really nice, even coat. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do all 12 shafts. I got a little rack over here. Going to let them sit for about 10 minutes. Then we're going to wipe it off with a paper towel. Depending on the color texture, how deep and dark it is, depends on if I'm going to add another coat of stain or not. My son's outside driving his little Ranger. We got him a little side-by-side for Christmas, and he is wearing that thing out. So, alright, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll change camera, and I'll come back to you guys whenever I have 2 coats on and ready to sand and crest. Alright, so we went ahead, we stained our shafts, they've cured, now we're going to dip them. This is just a little DIY rack dip tube station that I made. It's great for a couple arrows, but if you're going to be making a ton of arrows, I highly suggest getting a dip tube. So I went ahead and I dipped one. So what I do is I fill up my tube with semi-gloss clear coat. And so all we're going to do is we're going to dip our arrow. We'll pull it out. Let it drain. I'll let it drip, and it goes on as like almost a milky white, but as it dries, it's going to dry clear. So don't be alarmed if it looks white. So getting a solid stream here. Once it starts dripping, kind of dripping off, then I'll move on to the next shaft. And every once in a while, I'll go ahead and put some more in my tube. But it's not going to be a lot. And then I'm just going to work my way through all 12 shafts. You want them in, you want to keep them in a nice temperature-controlled room. My shop is not, but it's nice enough outside today that I can leave them out here overnight. So we're going to go ahead and do all 12 shafts, and then once they're dry, we'll go to the next step. So my friend ended up suggesting that I do things differently with this build to better match my jersey, so I figured I'd show you guys what I did. So after I dipped them in my little dip tube there, I wasn't fully satisfied with the color of the stain. I wanted it a little bit darker, and my friend actually suggested that I could get a darker look, and these are almost here black, and the reason being is because it is black. With the material that I'm using, this 2X Rust-Oleum spray actually is compatible with what I'm using, so I think that's what we're going to go ahead and do. All I did was sand down after I dipped them, went ahead and taped them back off and sprayed them, and then now they're actually dry. I took the tape off and used a 3M pad to knock down the gloss, and they're looking great. So I think these shafts are ready to be crested now. Alright, so just to recap, we straightened our shafts, we sanded them, we stained them, and then we dipped them. So after the dip, I wasn't really pleased with how the stain turned out. So a friend of mine actually suggested that I could use a Rust-Oleum 2x Performer. I believe that's what it's called, a 2X spray. So what I did was I taped them back off after I gave it a good sanding and actually sprayed it, and it turned out great. So after we sanded it, after I sprayed it, I went ahead and gave it another sand. Now we're going to go ahead and crest it, and then once we're finished cresting, we'll dip it. So we got our arrows crested. They're looking really nice. Everything's looking perfect. All we have to do now is scuff them up, dip them. Once they're finished dipping and curing, we're going to scuff them up one last time. We'll taper the tips down here, put on some points, and then we'll fletch them up, and they should be ready to go. Alright, so now that we're finished dipping our arrows, the next step is to taper the tips. I've already done it, but I'll go ahead and show you. Depending on the diameter of your shaft, they make taper tools, and pretty much it's got two settings. One is for your nock, and one is for the tip of the arrow where you install your field points. So I've already done both sides, but this works just like a pencil sharpener. So what you're going to do is feed it in there, and you'll start twisting, and it works literally just like a pencil sharpener. Shavings will come off, and then it'll bottom out to where there's no more shavings coming out. Pull it out, inspect it, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so now that we got our nocks tapered, what we're going to do now is install the nock. So on your arrow there's grains, and you want your grains running horizontal, not vertical. The reason being is your arrow, as it's shot, it snakes through the air. And if your arrow is too weak whenever you shoot, it can actually break. So even upon impact, if it's still snaking and it hits, it can break your shaft. So it's very important to make sure that your lines are vertical. So what I do is I just take a little bit of super glue gel, give myself a nice little thin coat on the inside of it, and then you just install. And I don't put it just directly on. I kind of put it on and give it a little bit of a twist, so that way the glue gets all over the shaft, all over the nock there. Wipe off the excess glue. There you go. Okay, so now we're ready to fletch. So for this, I'll be using 2 purples and 1 black as my cock feather. So this is my Bitzenberger jig. What it is it allows you to fletch a feather, turn, fletch, turn, and you're done. It just has a little bit of groove, a little bitty groove that this sits down in. And you want to make sure that it's seated properly. This is a right helical clamp, and I'll be using right helical feathers. So with this arrow, I've already made up my measurements. I know where I want my feathers to be. So it literally just sits right in the clamp. And then all you do is take some glue and clamp it right down. So what I use is Duco cement. It doesn't take a lot. You just put a little bitty bead on the bottom of the feather here, the fletching. And then it's magnetic. Push it down. That's it. Alright, so ignore all the stuff in my shop. What we're going to do now is just put on the tip, final part. What I have here is a little Ferrotite, boning Ferrotite. I got a little bit here left I'm going to use. All I do is melt it, put a little dab on the end, and then I'm going to take my clamps here, grab the point, get it nice and hot, put it on, and then I'm going to dip it in some water, and it should be set. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I highly suggest finding a better way to do this. I have this this glove that really helps out a lot, because it can burn your fingers if you ain't careful. Doesn't take much. Just going to heat this up a little bit. Don't just hold it right over the fire. I like to rotate it, get the entire point hot, where it doesn't compromise the metal. Just put it on. I like to point it down. I like to wipe the excess glue off with my glove and then dip it. I usually count to about 4 or 5 seconds. Pull it out. Turn off my torch. And that's it. I just clean up the excess glue. Just like so. And it's done.